immigration,
Yeah.
illegal immigration to be specific. And in that issue, there's something specific about that. According to a Quinnipiac University July 2010 poll based on New York State, 58% of the state believe that stricter enforcement of laws need to be part of any immigration reform. It's a serious issue. It's an issue that people obviously have very strong feelings about.
Yeah.
I know you've been working for 15 years now, and that's one of the subjects you've been working with. Or with
Comprehensive immigration reform, yes.
So I know you have something, you have a position on that.
Yeah.
Can you take a moment to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think if this president is reelected, and I think he will be in a position to bring this issue up. It's something that a second-term president can do. He's in a position to, if you win a second term, you can start working on some really long-term issues and issues that are difficult to bring to the public light. It's so easy to demagogue this issue and make any discussion about immigration reform an issue about whether you're for amnesty or against amnesty. And people who are anti-immigrant, tend to, start blaming immigrants for every problem in this country. The immigrants are destroying our schools, costing the federal government so much. Our budget would be balanced if it wasn't for the immigrants. It's outrageous, the level of the mendacity of the charges that get placed on a nation that was built on immigrants. Let's not forget who we are. And the fact that we have over 10 million people who are not, do not have legal status here, and they have children, and they're involved in the community, and they're doing important functions in our workforce. The idea that we would somehow remove these people from our population is just physically impossible. It's not going to happen, and it's also bad policy. These are people who should be brought into a legal status, so they're actually paying taxes. We know that we have an aging population. The immigrant population is a youthful population, and they're a working population. These are people who had the get up and go, literally, to leave whatever country they're in, but they're industrious people. They want to be working here legally, and they could actually strengthen our country in many ways if we were to give them a pathway to citizenship. Make it a staged process, where we're not just, accepting anybody here, but you have to earn your citizenship and do it in a processed manner. But we've got to address this issue because there's the idea that you can just round people up or get them to voluntarily self-deport. Both ideas are just, preposterous, and it's political pandering. So I prefer to deal with the reality. The reality is there's no way to deport all these people. They're already fairly established in this country in many ways. They have young children who by no fault of their own were brought into this world in America. We're not going to separate toddlers from their parents. So let's think about our roots and our compassionate side and pass this legislation and get these folks legally working here and paying taxes. And we talked about Social Security and Medicare. These are intergenerational contracts in many ways. Young workers pay into the system so they can get benefits when they retire. More young workers in the system for Social Security and Medicare is a good thing for seniors. So we got to think comprehensively when we embrace this issue, and I do hope that we get to this early on in the president's second term.
Okay.
How are we doing, Todd? We're fine.
And one other immigration issue that I do think is important is the H-1B visa issue, which allows highly skilled workers to stay here. That's capped right now at 85,000 people per year, and many of these people, you get a 3-year visa, work visa through that program, and you can apply for a second one, and then you're done. And we need to lift that cap and allow these highly trained people who in many cases came here to get their education and represent a significant investment by small businesses and probably large businesses too, in having a trained workforce and it's very disruptive to many high-tech companies to have these skilled workers be forced to leave the country. And that's hurting us. And these workers, you know, you can bet when they go, if they're forced to leave, they're going to start a company in whatever country they came from or are forced to leave. And we're basically creating competition for ourselves. This is the sort of common sense reform that I can't understand why we're not dealing with it. That's something I hope I get a chance to work on.
Okay. Let me ask you this. One moment. I'm just listening to what you were saying. So, are you saying that you're for a path to citizenship?
Oh yeah, I'm for a pathway, an earned pathway to citizenship, not a freebie. You know, there will be some cost with it, and it has to be done in a methodical way. And we got to make sure that, you know, we're not allowing dangerous people into this country. But the idea that this current president or the administration has been soft on immigrants is, you know, not borne out by the facts. I mean, we've deported more people, I believe, twice the number of the prior administration.
Almost, yes.
And so, you know, I don't buy into this. There's so much political rhetoric going on the issue of immigration. I think that shows how difficult it is to have a serious grown-up conversation about this. But that doesn't allow me to lose hope. I think the intelligence of having this, the importance of having this, is pretty obvious for the reasons I've just tried to explain. Why it just makes common sense, it's good business sense, it's good policy sense to take on this issue.
Let's switch gears to something completely different. Completely different. You've been involved in politics, and you've been working with Representative Maurice Hinchey, who used to handle the 23rd District, which this was, for 15 years. And so you've been involved with various aspects of politics. You've passed many laws.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the body of work that you've worked on, looking at the things that you've had your greatest passions in.
Yeah.
Is there one, maybe two, laws that you could say, this is something that I worked so hard on, whether passed or not,
Yeah.
that you work so hard on, you believe in this, and you think it's something that is not only symbolic of what you did for Mr. Hinchey, but also, more importantly, something that's symbolic of you?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple things. I mean, actually, many things when you work for somebody as high performing as Maurice Hinchey over the years. We were able to do a lot of important things. Probably the thing I'm most proud of that I've been involved in is with the remediation in the village of Endicott. The chemical contamination there was quite extensive. We had two of the childhood cancer hotspots in all of New York State in Broome County, and those were linked to the TCE contamination in both Hillcrest and Endicott, but the one in Endicott was worse. And so Maurice had me really dive into that issue on his behalf. He knew that my background was environmental policy, and when I started talking to him about this back in 2002 and 2003, saying, look, you know, we found vaporized trichloroethylene in indoor air in the homes in Endicott, and my suspicion is that these high cancer rates and birth defects are linked, is something that I really think we need to look into. And he, you know, just said, you have my full support, let's really work on this. Here are some ideas, here are some people I've worked with over the years, why don't you contact them? So we were successful on a number of different levels in dealing with this 300-acre toxic plume that's been called, you know, this threat to the village of Endicott over the years, and getting the New York State DEC to reclassify the region as a Class 2 Superfund site. It was formally classified as a Class 4, which just means that it was contained and didn't need anything else done. A Class 2 means it needs immediate remediation work and that it threatens public health. So that really stepped up the cleanup efforts in the village of Endicott. You know, increased the vaporization control mechanisms on the various houses, increased the pump and treat, you know, bringing the groundwater up and filtering it. We've removed hundreds of thousands of toxic chemicals from the groundwater in just the last few years because of this increased remediation effort. We also got the U.S. Department of Health to involve itself in a public health study and get the New York State Department of Health involved as well, to really look into the linkages between the health outcomes and the chemical exposure. That was done legislatively. That was one of the ideas that I brought to Maurice that got turned into law and an appropriation bill, directing the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry to work with New York State Department of Health to do this study. Additionally, we got the U.S. Department of Labor to do a former IBM worker health study, and that's ongoing right now through the Occupation of Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, within the Department of Labor. That, again, was a legislative directive that I worked with Maurice on, and we were able to turn into law. And this is an ongoing issue. It's not done yet, but it's something I'm very proud of because it set in motion, relief for people who've grown up in that community, exposed to chemicals, and had, very undesirable health outcomes impact them, And it was unfair, to have this, mega company, IBM, not accepting its responsibility, not even having a consent order on the books, something that's very important. They had somehow avoided ever entering into a consent order on the cleanup, which is highly unusual and something we discovered and insisted that the DEC establish with IBM. And a consent order is basically a roadmap for the remediation. Had we not been involved, that they still would be operating without a consent order. So we were able to really use our position as a congressional office and Maurice's expertise and my expertise to bring relief to this region. So I'm quite proud of that. So those are legislative things that we were able to do. Something that I'd like to see happen, and something I know this nation needs, is a movement to a more renewable energy. I believe we can create jobs this way. We can clean up the environment. We can reduce global warming, and we can create more energy independence for this nation if we were to establish a 25% renewable energy standard, meaning that about 25% of our energy comes from renewable sources, whether it's wind, solar, geothermal, grass pellets, photovoltaic. These are all emerging technologies, and some are very established, that we should be adopting and leading the world and creating. And I think it would certainly increase jobs. The Union of Concerned Scientists have issued a study showing that if we went for a 25% renewable energy standard, right now we're at about 15, but if we moved up to 25, we'd create over 300,000 jobs, and about $15 billion in local and state tax revenue, and about $15 billion in revenue for landowners who might have some of these systems on their property. And it would make us a global leader, like we should be on many things. I think it's a priority. It needs to be a national priority, and that's something I would be advocating for in Congress. And it would move us, instead of continuing to take these lateral steps on energy development, moving into more fossil fuels, it would move us upwards, in terms of, 21st century energy and creating jobs. And if we don't do it, another country will. And basically they are.
True.
And we're missing an opportunity, in my opinion.
Well, I want to thank you, Dan, for giving me the time to speak with you today. I know it's a hectic schedule. It's been very informative. I think these are some of the questions that can be very helpful for the voters out there as they go. Mm-hmm. Is there any other last thought you have before I let you go?
Well, I thank you for doing this interview, because we have to get people engaged in this process. Our democracy is only as strong as the citizens who get out and vote. And that's what is the basics of our country. That's the fabric. And so people need to be engaged, and they need to vote. And once we get elected, hold us accountable. And I really put a high premium on that relationship, as a candidate and hopefully the congressman from this area. The relationship between me and the constituents is very, very important. And I want to know that people participated in this election and helped choose the next Congress member for this region. And I just thank you for your part in getting the word out about this election and how important it is.
Well, I thank you for that. Thank you very much.
All right.